even a bigger investment in wireless, right, in broadband. What business wants to come up to Western New Hampshire or Northern New Hampshire if they can't essentially connect in what we now have as a global economy? When you make that investment, business comes in, the tax base grows, the taxes go down, right?
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight we have Sununu. That's a name that is very well known in New Hampshire. Comes from a family of politicians. He would like to be governor, and we're going to hear from him. And I'm sorry, I didn't do a bio on you. But I think you can introduce yourself, can't you?
Whatever you like. Whatever you like to do.
And I'm kind of hoping, Chris, I'm going to put you right on the spot now. We've already had Frank here, and I've talked to him, and we kind of think the New Boston would like to kind of host a little mini debate between you two at some point, and maybe have Rich Gerard be the moderator.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were Frank Gill, but Frank.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. Look at it, yeah. I mean, once everyone files or whatever that is.
Yes, I think that's in June.
Because there could be other candidates that get in or
Yes,
whatever.
that'd be fun.
Yeah, look, I love
We
debate.
did that with Jerry Lambert and Mary Linda.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Good.
Yeah.
You heard that.
No, I'll invite anyone anywhere. I love
Well,
that. So.
I'm going to tell you that these people will ask questions.
Great.
So you tell us what you think the vision should be, and they will ask you questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys very much. Let me do that. Thank you for having me here. Maybe a few minutes, just a little bit on my background so people understand. I mean, sure, a lot of people do know the Sununus and all that, but you know, people always say that I come from a big political family. I like to remind everyone that I'm number 7 of 8 kids. And my father and brother and myself have wandered into politics. 7 of us in the family were smart enough to stay out. So, but still, we're not quite a majority yet that have entered into the political field. But I grew up, for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Salem. Born and raised in Salem, New Hampshire. I went to MIT. I was an engineer. I was an environmental engineer for about 8 or 9 years. Moved a little more into the business field. In 2010, I put together a group of investors, and we bought, and I now run Waterville Valley Resort up in the White Mountains. My wife and 3 kids, we all live out in Newfields, which is a small town just beyond Exeter. So we spend a lot of time on the seacoast, but I'm commuting up to Waterville quite a bit. It's a heck of a commute, but it takes me through Concord. At the same time, in 2010, when I bought Waterville Valley and took that over, I also ran for the Executive Council. I won't bore everyone with the details of our quirky Executive Council. For those who don't know, again, we are one of the few states that does have an Executive Council. There are 5 of us. I represent about 250,000 people. I believe New Boston, I have to double check, I believe New Boston's represented by Councillor Wheeler.
Is
that right?
Wheeler, yes.
Yeah, because there was a little redistricting and I couldn't remember where New Boston ended up, which is great. Dave does a terrific job. We all represent about 250,000 people, and you know, our basic functions are virtually all the contracts in the state kind of get one last approval with the Executive Council. You need 3 votes on the council as well as the governor to get any contract moving forward in the state, whether it's a snowplow, a small $10,000, $20,000 snowplowing contract, or something as big as do we set up healthcare exchanges for Obamacare. That all comes before. So it's a pure checks and balance, really, on the power of the governor. It's an amazing thing, frankly, in the fact that we're the only state that really has one. Every nomination that the governor makes, every nomination, whether it's the Board of Dietitians to the Supreme Court Justice, it all requires 3 votes out of the council. Again, pure checks and balance. I love it. I think it's an incredibly unique position. I love doing it. I've been doing it since 2010. I was elected 3 times. And this past year, you know, I started, people had asked in the last election cycle if I considered running for governor, and, you know, given family and my business, it really wasn't the right time. But in this past year, I did start looking at it quite seriously. And what I started seeing going on in Concord really led me to the belief that we really do need real leadership in Concord. It is something we are severely lacking. New Hampshire's a great state. It is a fantastic state. I'm not going to come in here and tell you that there's 1,000 things wrong with the state and, you know, the sky is falling. It's not. We have great fundamentals here that have always made this state pretty good in terms of, look, we have no broad-based taxes. We don't have income tax. We don't have sales tax. We have great local control. Those fundamentals, and we have great checks and balances on the power within government. And so, as an engineer, I'm always about feedback and response systems. If things aren't going well, usually the people of New Hampshire are pretty darn smart, and we have the ability to change it quickly. We don't have to suffer through bad decisions very long. It's a great local power that we do have. But what I am seeing in Concord, and something I like to talk about is, we need leadership that understands how policy that we talk about in Concord is impacting people's lives. I think there's a real disconnect there sometimes. I have about 700 employees up at Waterford College. And I can tell you, there are days, the example I like to give is Obamacare, right? So one morning we're sitting there with Governor Lynch at the time, and we're debating whether we should set up healthcare exchanges for Obamacare. And we're talking about the pros and cons, and we're debating back and forth. And it didn't occur to me until after the fact, I was the only one that then got out of my seat, drove to work that afternoon, and then had hundreds of employees in front of me, and I was explaining to them what Obamacare meant, how it was going to impact them, what the financial impacts were going to be. And let me tell you something, working with 700 families in the North Country, God bless those folks, they really are a second family to me. They don't have a whole lot of margin of error financially. They really don't. Not that a lot of us do, but they really don't. And so you got to understand about what you're doing in Concord. While I believe the folks in Concord really have passion and philosophy behind what they're doing. If you don't see how it's impacting people's lives, I believe you're making decisions in a vacuum. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think when you don't have real business experience behind someone in the executive office, you can get problems. And that's what I have seen. When I saw Governor Hassan walk out and say, well, we don't need to worry about lowering business taxes. Business taxes don't really matter. This was her quote, because they really just affect large out-of-state corporations. The ignorance of that statement, I have to tell you, sent shivers through me as a business owner, as a constituent. How are you, never mind trying to attract business into the state, you're now shunning businesses and pushing them essentially out of the state. Right? If you don't understand the variables that a business leader will make, whether they're going to grow or expand or have to hire or let people go or invest capital, if you don't understand those variables in the executive office, then again, how can you be expected to make the right decisions? When was the last time we brought a major corporation into this state? A new major business. When was the last time we attracted one? 5, 6 years ago? You know, Saffron out on the seacoast? It's great, they're doing very well. Okay? New Hampshire used to be the shining example of economic growth. Our economy right now is essentially stagnant. Our population growth is stagnant. We have trouble bringing in young people into this state. We're stagnant. We used to be the shining example of New England. Right? God bless Charlie Baker down in Massachusetts. I saw Charlie a few weeks ago. He's doing an incredible job. He has turned that state around. They're growing their economy. They're dealing with their substance abuse issues, something I'll talk about in a moment, which I think we failed on. And now we're looking to Massachusetts to see what they're doing. That wasn't the I mean, when I grew up, that was not the New Hampshire I grew up in. When I grew up, New Hampshire was the example, not just for New England, for the rest of the country. You know, we had all those fundamentals. We kept things local. We had leadership that understood how to bring business in and how to constantly grow our economy. We just don't have it right now. You need leadership with that kind of experience. The second thing I talk about a lot in terms of what I'm out there for, I talk a lot about education. I'm a big believer in the value of education. And again, education in public schools today is not what it was. And I speak very directly. I'm a dad. I have a 5th grader and a 4th grader. I have a 3-year-old as well. So he'll be entering the schools. And so I'm living the education system every day, whether it's at the school board or seeing what's coming home with my kids. I'm a big believer in equal opportunity education. We don't have it here in New Hampshire. School choice, right? Parents should be dictating where and how their kids are going to go to school. Right? The fact in New Hampshire, I mean, look at what happened in Croydon. I'll use that quick example. For those of you who don't know, the small hamlet of Croydon, I love that little town, less than 1,000 people. Their elementary school only goes so high into a certain grade, and they've made a choice. It's actually cheaper for them, but they take their public dollars, and then they give parents an option of where they want to send their kids. And there are a few families, 5 or 6 families, that have chosen in the past few years, they send them to the local Montessori school. And everyone's fine with it. It's a system that works for them. They've made that choice. What did our governor and attorney general do? And I saw the attorney general this afternoon at lunch, and I went after him again. We're going to sue you. That was the answer. They're suing the town because the town is making a choice. The whole idea of local control is getting thrown right out the window, right? The town is making a choice. Everyone is in agreement on it. And yet the attorney general and the governor's response is, we're going to sue you. So now Croydon has to raise funds to defend themselves from a lawsuit from the state because 5 kids. 5 families have chosen to send these kids to the local Montessori school where they get a great education. It's actually cheaper. They actually save money by doing that, believe it or not. But again, it's all, with this governor, it's all about, frankly, sue first, ask questions later. That isn't leadership. That isn't leadership. That isn't how you grow things, how you get things done. That isn't finding positive solutions. I mean, the answer would have been to, if they were so stuck on the law, you know what? We're going to let it go for now, and let's go to the legislature and see if we can change the law to allow these parents to have the choice to do what's right for them. It isn't up to the state, and Lord knows it is not up to the federal government. That's another one that drives me crazy. The federal government has dangled these education mandates out to the state. They've teased us with the money so that they can then have control over the policy. And we can talk about Common Core. I think Common Core is a disaster because it's not local. I'm sorry, a bunch of bureaucrats out of Washington, D.C. do not know what is best for our kids. You know what's best for your families. Your local communities know what's best. And if you want to make that change, you should be able to make that change at the local school board. You have a lot of power there to make that change. That feedback response system. Again, if you don't like what's going on, you can show up at your local school board and make the changes. That is what made New Hampshire so great. You're losing that. That's a fundamental aspect of what makes us so good, and I really believe we're losing it. There are some other issues on education that we can get into. I'm a big believer that we should be able to pay the best teachers, the brightest teachers, the best wages. What's wrong with that? Accountability in the classroom. Control of the curriculum within there. My son came home last year, and we started keeping track. He practiced for the standardized test, the Common Core test. Practiced for 28 days. He took an hour to 2 hours, depending on what it was. We kept track 28 times before the test. Okay? There's all this pressure on these tests. I don't mind standardized tests, don't get me wrong. But I want a standardized test that's developed around our curriculum, that's developed locally, that's developed with parents and teachers' input, that's actually going to matter. Right? Not some random test that's given to us out of Washington, D.C. The last thing I'll talk about a little bit, and then we can open it for questions. I talk a lot about it on the campaign trail, is the substance abuse issue. It's something that has hit me personally. I think it's probably hit most of us in one way or another personally. I've been incredibly critical of the governor on this. She brought in a drug czar. I think a drug czar is actually a good idea. I didn't agree that they took money from the charitable foundation to pay for her staff. That's a fundamental problem I had right there. Right before Christmas, they took charitable foundation money to pay for bureaucrats. That's just not right in the beginning. This is a gentleman who refused to go out, hadn't talked to anyone on the front lines in law enforcement for the first 6 or 7 months, hadn't talked to anyone in a recovery center. How can you be dealing with such a critical crisis issue if you're unwilling to go out and talk about it on the front lines? Right? You've got to see what's going on out there, again, to be able to make decisions. You have to understand how policy impacts people's lives. And we have fallen behind. So this crisis has been slowly rolling, we've been slowly rolling into it for a couple of years now. But just this November, the governor asked us to bring a special session of the legislature back to deal with it. Where was she last November? Why weren't we talking about this in the spring? Why did we have to wait for the governor to decide to run for the U.S. Senate and 300 people to die before she decided that she was going to take this up as a primary issue? That's insulting. That gets me angry. It really does. I don't get angry at a whole lot. But when I heard that, after months and months of begging her to fire her drug czar, get someone in there that knows what they're talking about, this is not a political issue. Substance abuse should not be a political issue. It is a straightforward issue. We know what we need to do. We have recovery centers that I've been there, I've talked to them. They have great new models. We have the funds. The governor had no idea we had a $12 million grant. I don't know if you guys saw that. The state was awarded $12 million to attack substance abuse. Outstanding, terrific. And when WMUR showed up at the governor's office and said, "This is great, what are the plans?" Her response was, "We don't know what you're talking about. We'll have to look into it." Are you kidding me? Talk about being asleep at the wheel during the biggest health crisis the state has faced in decades. Unacceptable. It's simply unacceptable. And it's when I saw that kind of stuff that I said something has to be done. We need leadership that is willing to make tough decisions, to understand long-term strategy. We have virtually no long-term strategies in the state. You want to talk about energy. You want to talk about any number of issues. Education. Everyone in Concord deals in 2-year chunks. It's really frustrating because they're all looking for the next election cycle. We need long-term plans. Because when you think long-term, it takes the politics out of it, fundamentally. Because, no governor's going to be around technically for 10 years, and a lot of the reps and the senators probably won't be around for very long. Long-term means you're focusing on the kids. And for me, I'm a little selfish. For me, it's all about my kids. I want to make sure New Hampshire is in a great place so they want to live and work here and build their families here. That's what this is about. That's what I think it's about for a lot of us in New Hampshire. So I get a little passionate about it. I get kind of fired up on certain issues. I guess maybe I'll kind of leave it there. We can open it up for questions. You know, the last thing I do want to reiterate, I just want to repeat what we heard earlier. We got to come together. You know, we'll have primaries. I think good primaries are good things, and that's fine, whether it's the governor's race or the Senate or, you know, through the presidentials, local races. Primaries are fine things, but let me tell you, we have to come together. And my belief is if we wait till September to decide we may or may not come together after our state primaries, that's too late. That is too late. We have to make that conscious decision today. Look what happened in 2010. When we came together as a party in 2010, we had good primaries, but we steamrolled them. We absolutely steamrolled them. We carried momentum all the way into November, and it was lights out. The Republicans won all across the state. And there's a reason, because when we come together, we're not fighting with each other. And you know who we're giving confidence to? Not just folks within our own party. We're actually giving confidence to the independents and some Democrats that say, look, these guys are working together. You know, they may not agree on everything, but they're working together. They're people you can get behind. Winning elections is not necessarily, it's not about convincing someone you have the right answers, right? It's about kind of opening yourself up a little, showing people what your philosophy is, making yourself transparent, and it's really getting folks to essentially buy into the idea that you're going to do what you truly believe in. I think there's so much distrust in politics right now. You got to open yourself up a little bit. When we do that, like we did in 2010, and we didn't fight, we didn't, you know, go into some shelling position, as I like to call it, defensive position. We should be defensive. We should be open and understanding. And by all means, if people don't agree with where I stand in things, that's perfectly fine. Let's talk about it. Let's debate it. I have a philosophy. I stick by every vote. I sleep very well out of my thousands of votes at the Executive Council. I love what I do, but we really do need to come together as a party. We need to make that decision now. And if we do, we win. We absolutely win. And you can't govern if you don't win, right? You cannot govern if you don't win. Don't give it away to the other side. You might have a candidate you only agree with 80% of the time or 70% of the time, but I guarantee you that's a heck of a lot more than you're going to agree with the person on the other side of the ticket. You know, then we can worry about the details a little bit once we have control of some of these offices and we have the people in there that we really want to stand behind. So again, I just want to pile on there. I think that's an absolutely great point. Really needs to be made and talked about, I think, for the next 9 months as we roll into November. I don't want to talk too much. I'm a Sununu, I can talk all day. Lord knows, but well, thank you guys very much. Look, let me say this: my email address, my cell phone number's on my card. Please send me other questions. Call me up. Let me know. I'm getting out early. I know people know the Sununu thing and all, but I'm Chris Sununu. I'm not John Sununu. We all kind of go our own way. Send me questions. Ask me. You know, invite me to other events. Bring me to house parties. Whatever it is. I want to open myself up. I want to spend the time over the next year kind of earning your vote and really getting out there. And again, I hope you'll support me come November. It's gonna be a good year. Let's stick together as Republicans. Let's rally around our candidates and make sure we don't have another bad November. November 2016 can be great if we make it great. Thank you guys. Where it was understood, it was personal responsibility. If you didn't have the money, you didn't get it. And what do we see now? We see a culture now, and I'm going to put it right on the Democrats, frankly, where they say not only is it fine to take on as much debt, we're going to help you take on abnormal amounts of debt and cripple your future, right? And whether it's with education, or let's start on what they did with the subprime crisis, right? When Washington said, we need to create programs to make sure everybody can buy a house.